Well, it's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of French life. This week, we're going to focus on a reputation France has, that's of being a country on strike all the time. Now, this week was marked by strikes across the country, taxi drivers, farmers, teachers, which begs the question, is striking stereotypically French? Well, for more on this, of course, we've got Flo Vilmino with a look then at what's taking place. Flo, so is it typically French?
Well, it's definitely something that pops to mind when you think about France, isn't it? And what's interesting is the whole idea of today's show came from a question from one of our viewers. He tweeted me. This is Robert Skelton. Let's take a look at his question. He says, why is France so accepting of civil disorder, for instance, taxi drivers blocking roads, similarly farmers, workers imprisoning bosses, and certainly we saw a whole bunch of that this week. Angry people in the streets, taxi drivers burning tires to strike, faire la grève, as it's said here in France. It's a very common expression, and it's our word du jour here in France. And what's funny is actually a whole bunch of people here in the newsroom told me that this word, grève, is one of the very first words they ever learned in French. So it's quite telling, but does that mean it's really part of our DNA?
Well, indeed, some would say that there is a striking culture in France, but where does it come from exactly?
Well, it all comes down to the relationship between workers and bosses and how that relationship works. Now, a lot of that has to do with France's very powerful trade unions, but that's a whole other kettle of fish I'll have to tell you about in another episode of French Connections. It also really comes down to history, though, and this is something I didn't know that I learned while I was doing research for this show. French citizens actually won the right to strike in 1864. 20 years before they earned the right to unionize. And this time gap was very important because it created a culture of workplace power struggles. And what's interesting is if you compare what happens here in France to other European countries tend to negotiate first and only strike if talks fall through. But here in France, it's the complete opposite. You strike first, show your muscles, and then you get down and talk.
So then is the reputation then as France being a striking country, is it fair? Is it well-deserved?
Well, the results are quite striking, I guess you could say. But it's a little tricky because there are no real standardized statistics, but certain studies have been carried out for specific time periods. Let's take a look at this study, for instance, which was carried out by The Economist that compared the total number of working days lost to strikes in 2009. And as you can see here, Canada topped the list, followed by South Africa, and then comes France. Quite surprising. Now, another study was carried out here in Europe, and it compares the days lost to strikes per 1,000 employees. This is another way of counting it, and this is between 2009 and 2013. And you can see Cyprus is way ahead of France in this list, and just behind France, you have Denmark and Norway. So we're not the worst. And another interesting thing is that the trend is declining. We are striking less and less days per year.
So then why is this stereotype really stuck around then for the French?
Well, some might say that striking is in our blood here in France, and it's certainly part of our cultural heritage. There's a certain national glorification of citizens coming together to fight the man, and you just have to think about the French Revolution and all the popular uprising sense. And this painting you're looking at right here, this is the Delacroix painting, La Liberté guidant le peuple. It commemorated an uprising in the 1830s, and it's really come to become a symbol of France and the way we define ourselves as a democracy.
And indeed, in recent history, the biggest social uprising and general strike, it did happen in May of 1968.
That's right. May 68 is considered a real turning point in French society and definitely contributes to the myth of France as a land of striking. It's interesting to listen to Daniel Cohn-Bendit. He was one of the student leaders at the time. He's a politician, and here he is in 2008, so 40 years after the May 68 uprising, reflecting on the legacy of May 68. Let's take a listen.
There were revolts everywhere, but a general strike on that scale, it only happened in France. It's a French specialty, made in France. May 68 is the epitome of made in France. It's something French people are proud of. They say we were wonderful, it was extraordinary, and we were the best.
And indeed, Flo, some would say that the French have striking down to a fine art, saying it's all about the blend between inconvenience and visibility.
That's right, and that might explain why people feel like strikes happen all the time here in France, even if statistically they don't really. They get a lot of media attention around the world, and they cause a lot of disruption. Just think of all the travel disruption, and all this tends to give France a bad rap abroad. But what's interesting is that here in France, people also really complain about strikes, but the general public also tends to be quite forgiving of people essentially defending their rights. And as shocking as they can be abroad, French people tend to accept strikes as kind of a necessary evil for the greater good. So I guess they kind of grin and bear it, and also complain a lot about it, because we are French after all.
It's a right then. All right, Flo, thank you very much for that. And for more from Flo, if you have any questions about France that you'd like us to explore in French Connections, feel free to tweet Flo at Flo Villemino. You can also check out our website. That's France24.com.